Welcome to Evolving Humans. I'm your host, Julia Marie, and this podcast is for visionary people like you who are exploring the true nature of reality and want to contribute to the global awakening. You seek to deepen the connection to your multidimensional self so that you can live a more conscious life. I'm going to do something a little different today. There's been a lot of talk about 2024 and what it's going to bring for humanity. Since the early 2000s, I've been giving a presentation called The Planet is Ascending, and so are you. I updated this presentation in 2013 and again this year. Instead of an in-person presentation, I'm being guided to do an Evolving Humans episode about this. I feel the reason is to hopefully provide a little more context about what's going on here. Everything I say here is an expression of my personal understanding, so it's not necessary that you agree with it. Just listen with an open mind, and perhaps you'll hear something that resonates as true for you. It's my personal perspective that the planetary ascension process happens in waves, and that with each wave, the planetary frequency shifts. This next wave is going to last for a couple of decades, and in my view, will be one of the most significant. I hope this episode gives you a greater context for the time frame of this great shift of the ages, and will help you have a better understanding of the scope of this planetary awakening. And now, the planet is ascending and so are you. 2023 update. The planet is shifting because it's her time. You're on the planet. You're being affected by this process whether you want to be or not. Your physical matter, your body structure, will change in response to the upshifting frequencies. And it's my belief that when you increase your base resonating frequency, which is the frequency we normally vibrate at any given day, when you increase that base resonating frequency, you automatically trigger your special keys and codes and activations. So before I get into the meat of what I'm going to talk to you about today, I want to share some fundamental things that I know to be true. First, we all carry answers for each other. No single one of us has all the pieces. By design, we must work together to complete this puzzle in order to bring forth the birthing of a new reality. And my sense of what's happening here, a new species. I was told almost 35 years ago that this has never been done anywhere else in creation. I also believe that those of us who are already alive and were born before the 2000 mark still have the potential to upgrade our energy systems and evolve along with the planet because we're still living an embodied life here. Second, the tuning fork of truth resides in your heart. What that means is you'll recognize truth when you hear it or feel it or are in the presence of it. And third, the most important skill you can develop at this time is your intuition and your confidence in your own connection to your soul. How many of you have noticed the rise in volatility, the ups and downs in the weather, the economy, and the people around you? We are transitioning from one world, the old one, primarily masculine in expression, to a new world with new ways of being. And it's never been experienced as a collective on Earth. We've had enlightened individuals, such as Buddha or Christ or Krishna, but not the enlightenment of an entire collective, such as humanity. This whole process starts with a sense of things speeding up. How many of you feel time is accelerating, or that there's not enough of it every day? We're moving out of linearity into the now where all is present. One of the things I recommend is for us to perhaps not view this acceleration as something moving faster, but hold in our mind instead the image of it being an expansion of our awareness. What this does is it overcomes the mental picture of having to always catch up. So we're moving away from looking outside of ourselves or being affected by things externally, and we're moving towards our center point, the place of our awareness, where our soul expresses from. We're in transition, you and I, and we're in it together. And anyone who's given birth or witnessed birth understands the toughest time in the process is transition. It's the last phase of active labor, and it can be particularly intense and painful. The contractions come closer together, and each one lasts longer. So if we apply this analogy to the planetary birthing process, I think we can all agree the Earth is in her transition phase. With the increased out-of-balance weather events and conflict everywhere, upset and upheaval in our economic and personal lives, things are getting messy. I say it's the best time for us to remember that if we're here, at this point in the process, the next stage is the actual birthing or bringing forth of a new octave of consciousness. I'm going to repeat myself here. Ascension is a process. It's not an event. We're shifting where we are here. And why do I say this? Because we're spirit-animated form. And thus we are made up of both worlds. We've just forgotten who we are. According to my teachers, it's more a matter of the evolution of matter, the involution of spirit, two massive counter-rotating fields that are occurring simultaneously. So the impact or the effect would be technically we're going to meet in the middle. And also understand the concept of we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. So we have 12 strands of DNA, spiritual DNA, that have the potential to be activated. And this I came to understand from a very early teaching where I was told to look at Jesus and the 12 disciples as a three-dimensional model of my own enlightenment. When all 12 strands of his spiritual DNA were activated over the course of his lifetime, he achieved Christ consciousness, which I believe that is as well our goal. So he was a fully ensouled being. All 12 aspects of his greater self were grounded into this dimension through the vehicle of his physical body. And because there are 12 strands in our makeup, and we are a microcosm of the macrocosm, that implies then there are 12 layers or levels of awareness in the octave of existence that we currently find ourselves in. At the micro level, Jesus was the seed for a fully ensouled being planted into the template of humanity, that yes, it is possible for us to achieve Christ consciousness while incarnated in human form. At the macro level, I personally believe that the 12-strand activation for the planet was completed and was marked by the beginning of the shift of the ages in December of 2012. So right now I want to talk about cycles, celestial and galactic cycles within cycles within cycles. Hear this with your heart if you can. Once every several billion years, celestial and galactic cycles converge at the same time and create a grand cosmic wave of energy that ripples throughout all of creation. These pulsations bring all of life into synchronous rhythm with the heartbeat of all that is, and all of creation is breathed into a higher octave of evolution. That's what's happening right now. We are in the middle of one of these great shifts of the ages, but we're talking massively large cycles beyond our human mind's ability to comprehend. I'm going to list some of the cycles that are coming to a close all at the same time in order for you to understand the magnitude of what we're actually in the middle of. We have the millennial shift from Pisces. The Christ consciousness seed was planted to Aquarius. That's a 2,000-year cycle. That's the one we're most familiar with. Then we have the precession of the equinoxes, which is a 26,000-year cycle. Again, one that most of us are familiar with. But we also have a 438,000-year cycle known as a Kali Yuga that is completing at this time. So it takes longer for it to draw to a close. Then there's a 1.8 million year cycle known as Satya Yuga, which is also completing. A 4.4 million year cycle known as a Maha Yuga that is coming to an end at this time. And the largest cycle of all, a 4.1 billion year cycle known as Kalpa, or 1 day of Brahma, is also completing at this time. The tumblers of the lock are all aligning themselves, and then the incoming energy from Source is going to stream in to assist with this shift. Now, just to give you a small sense of how long this shift of the ages has been, and I'm sure there are events that came well before my time, but I'm only going to go with the ones that I'm most familiar with here. We'll start with the harmonic convergence in 1987. I was not awakened at this time, but I believe it was this event that was the triggering vibrational shift that led to my activation. And it's why I tell people, don't be too concerned about where you find yourself on your journey. You will come online according to your own unique timing. During the decade of 1990 to 2000, I noticed the inbeaming of 5 higher octave chakra energies, one every 2 years. And I believe that these were perhaps reactivating the planetary strands, but they were certainly providing us the opportunity to, as a species, and not just singular individuals, to begin to activate our long dormant 5 higher strands. Because, as I said earlier, this is a base 12 creation, not a base 7 creation. And as above, so below would always apply. So it was during this decade that it first became possible for us to be able to resonate in sympathy with the galactic blueprint for this part of creation. There were many other heavenly configurations that helped to establish the foundation of what was to come. I'll list a few of them here quickly. A grand cross and eclipse on August 11th, 1999. That established the foundation for the shift, because a square is a fixed, stable shape. 6 planets synchronized to form a Star of David, which to me is the symbol of this simultaneous involution-evolution process that I spoke about earlier. So it's a symbol of the pulsing spirals of creation. This Star of David configuration happened around the Earth during a full moon lunar eclipse. And on November 8th, 2003, we had the harmonic concordance, which is another 6 planetary body configuration of the Sun, Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Chiron, the wounded healer. The most influential one of these transits that I believe prepared us for December of 2012 was a series of Venus transits that began June 8th of 2004 and ended June 6th, 2012. Now, Venus transits are rare. They happen once every 121 years, and it's an 8-year cycle that's marked by a transit of Venus across the face of the Sun at the beginning and again at the end of this series of transits. Venus, during this time period of 8 years, draws a series of 5-pointed stars in the heavens. It takes 1.618 years to complete each one. Interesting note, pentagrams themselves incorporate the universal golden ratio of 1.618. Pi, aka the golden mean, is the fundamental harmonic relationship in evolution throughout the cosmos and on all levels of consciousness, and Venus is drawing this ratio in the heavens during this last Venus transit. It is said that there will be signs written in the heavens for all to see, and it's my view that that's what all of these heavenly configurations are, signs written for all who have the eyes to see them to see. Now, Venus, as we all know, is the planet of relationships, and I feel this particular Venus transit heralded the reemergence of the divine feminine. Transits are related to shifts in human consciousness. The energetic purpose of a Venus transit is to embody and communicate to us the frequency of unity consciousness on a human, a planetary, and a cosmic scale. So I want to just take a moment here to give you some examples of what happened during some of the Venus transits in the past, which to me feel like they symbolize the building of the template for the global brain, unity consciousness for lack of a better word, or at least the establishing of the pattern or template for that possibility. In 1518 to 1526, during this transit, Magellan circumnavigated the globe and changed the worldview from flat to round, and I believe this was an indication of global consciousness moving from the state of being totally asleep to beginning to awaken. During the transit of 1631 to 1639, we saw the first regular mail service in Europe, the speeding up of communication, and the expansion of the ability to communicate with each other. And it's no surprise that 1761 to 1769, the American Revolution had its origins during this period. 1874 to 1882 saw the founding of the World Postal Union, and the transatlantic telegraph cable was completed. To me, this was symbolic of the joining of the two hemispheres of the global brain, and we also saw the rise of women's suffrage in the United States, New Zealand, and Australia. And then the Venus transit of 2004 to 2012, when the plane of our solar system lined up with the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, and completed that 26,000-year cycle I spoke of earlier. We saw a massive expansion of instantaneous connectivity via technology. There's no more lag in communication between individuals and the collective. Is this perhaps the 3D modeling for telepathy, which is instantaneous communication? Then an interesting thing happened between 2012 and 2015. We had 7 squares where Uranus squared Pluto. And I feel the theme of this series of squares can best be described as evolution and enlightenment, or maybe revolution and revelation. I'm not an astrologer by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been guided by Spirit to pay attention to the heavens in order to have a better understanding of what is happening here on Earth. Now, Uranus and Pluto are both transpersonal planets, which means they tend to evoke major change in the world. Uranus is about the potential for awakening, and Pluto is all about transformation. I see this series of squares as a journey of initiation into more enhanced realities and more profound expressions of togetherness. And we did experience a lot of undercurrents of shifting energies beneath the surface of the planet and the surface of our consciousness. This was one of the most significant and challenging influences of our time, especially for people that were born during the influence of the start of this Uranus-Pluto dance, which was in the 1960s. So this would have primarily affected people in their 40s and 50s. Uranus signifies the part of us, and in this case, I'm speaking to the collective us, that seeks independence and rebels against the status quo and rules Aquarius, the sign of humanitarian consciousness. Uranus inspires innovation and triggers both unexpected and unusual events. And, no surprise, rules technology and electronics. Pluto signifies power with a capital P and the transformation process. Again, on the collective level, Pluto was lord of the underworld, and transformation involves the death of the old before something new can be reborn on a higher level. Pluto seeks power. Uranus seeks freedom. This dynamic creates tension between these two energies, and we saw radical change, and some of it was sudden. The last time these two planets were squared like that was in the 1930s, and that's when we had the Great Depression and a time when there was upheaval globally. It's a little tough to explain, but just think of it as wheels within wheels, because the greater Uranus-Pluto dance, and this is really important to what I'm going to be talking about later in this episode. The greater Uranus-Pluto dance is a cycle that lasts 138 years. This cycle began with Uranus and Pluto conjunct in Virgo in the 1960s and will continue to bring change through 2045. This part of that larger Uranus-Pluto dance began in 2012 and continued through March 2015. And some of the things that we saw as a result of this, well, the universal health care and other issues about well-being, workforce and job challenges. In the days of the old 9 to 5, they certainly were numbered. We had nutrition and food production issues and changes in the way we structure our days with more focus on spirit, mind, body, soul. And know this, starting in 2024, Pluto is going to be changing signs, continuing its dance with Uranus. Whenever Pluto changes signs, it's a big deal, because Pluto transits happen only every 12 to 30 years. Pluto is known as a generation planet because entire generations are born with the same Pluto and therefore the same outlook. As I said earlier, Pluto is the planet of birth, rebirth, and in my opinion, most importantly, transformation. Pluto takes 248 years to make a single orbit around the Sun. And it's interesting to note, Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn since 2008. What does Capricorn rule? Structure, government, and the practical. It's no surprise then we've seen authoritarian governments and large corporations grow in power. Aquarius, on the other hand, rules independence, community, innovation, scientific reasoning, and the rational. So watch for community-centered movements, technological innovations, and more calls for independence and freedom. From November 19th of 2024 until March 8th of 2043, Pluto, yes, it's going to dance in and out of this sign, but it is primarily going to be in Aquarius. And we need to pay special attention to what happens between January and September of 2024. That's going to give us a real taste of what's to come between 2024 and 2043-44. When Pluto is in Aquarius, we question the status quo and what is real. Everything seems to get turned on its head. So look for conflict between the technology we use and the user. Watch for mergers and dissolutions in the tech industry and power struggles between big tech and government. Pluto also brings that which is hidden to light. So watch for the exposure of more secrets and lies, which is probably why we've already seen some of that happening before the official beginning of this transit, because we're already feeling the influence of it. So keep in mind, we've been in this shadow of this transit for a few years. Pluto's transits are so slow. And so with Pluto in Capricorn, government secrets and corruption were laid out for all to see. Pluto in Aquarius will likely bring the same sort of revelation, only this time it will be the mega tech companies that will have their secrets spilled. And what does this transit mean for humanity as a whole? I won't claim that it'll bring world peace by its end, but I will say any movement or action in that direction would have to bring better days for everyone. People, we have 20 years to make a difference. I mentioned earlier that Pluto was a generational planet, so I want to take a few minutes here to match the Pluto generations with the waves of awakening or ascension that we've had over the last 6 Pluto generations. So we'll start with 1937 to 1958. Pluto was in Leo, which is a fire sign. And this generation's power was the ability to use self-realization to make an impact on the collective. Some of you may know this generation as the baby boomers or the me generation. This generation came of age in the late 60s and the early 70s. And it was all about sweeping social reform and protest movements. We had a rise of the feminist movement, and the influencers of this time ranged from Angela Davis, who was a radical and political activist. Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan personified the new feminist movement, and there was social and political power was transformed by leaders who were not afraid to stand up to corruption, racism, greed, and the prevailing patriarchy. This generation also saw the murder of John F. Kennedy in 1963, Malcolm X in 1965, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. These murders shook the nation, and they remain shrouded in mystery to this day, which is another Plutonian attribute. Individual desires took front and center for this generation. Look at Woodstock at the 1969 Summer of Soul Festival. It was all about fun and expressing one's own sense of style. We learned it only takes one person to make a difference. Pluto in Virgo, early generation X here, is 1956 to 1972. These individuals came of age in the 1990s and saw the rise of independence in the underground. MTV made its debut, and there was the surge of indie bookstores and the obsession with grunge. This is the keep it real generation. Authenticity comes first, and this was also the generation that was sent to fight in the Gulf War. Pluto in Libra is late Generation X. This would have been 1971 to 1984. You're the second guard of Generation X. You came of age in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. You rode that cresting second wave of feminism, the Me Too movement and all of that. It was all about seeking fairness, equity, and justice. We also had a boom in mass incarceration in the 90s because of the tough-on-crime policies. Yet Pluto in Libra is continually searching for equality. The millennials come next, 1983 to 1995. This is Pluto in Scorpio. It's all about exposing secrets. That's the superpower of this generation. And most of the podcasters out there doing this kind of work come from this generation. As teens, you witnessed the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and endured the Iraq War and Afghanistan wars that followed. As you entered the workforce in the 2000s, the Great Recession hit you. You were poised to carry the torch of truth through the swamp of shame, secrecy, and lies, however. Social networks were made for the Pluto and Scorpio generation, and they've made public their very private lives. This generation is predicated on hope. But no, Pluto may forgive, but it will never forget. Early generation Z is 1995 to 2008, and this is Pluto in Sagittarius. This generation has the ability to go to the ends of the earth to fight for meaningful redistribution of power in the world. And their goal is to free themselves and society from the chains of convention that bind us all. This generation rejects convention, and they are the first true digital natives. You reject dualism outright, and you seek new ways to find meaning in your lives. And now we come to Pluto in Capricorn. This is late Gen Z and what's now called Generation Alpha. These are individuals born between 2008 and 2024. I would call these people the alchemical generation because they are the builders of our new collective future. We've already seen the crumbling of institutions and power structures that are all long past their time of usefulness. Pluto and Capricorn people are the children of Pluto in Libra and Pluto and Scorpio generations. Many of you now are rejecting devices in favor of going offline, walking in nature, and writing in actual physical notebooks. This generation is perfectly positioned to preserve tradition and carry it into the future once Pluto fully enters Aquarius for 20 years, starting in 2024. You are the generation that will take the things of value from the past and build a brand new foundation for our collective future. Remember when I earlier mentioned the Uranus-Pluto dance lasting for 136 years? The end date is 2045, basically the same time as the end of this Pluto trance that everyone's talking about, moving into Aquarius. It's why I've been marking 2043 to 2045 as the indicator of a major shift in consciousness since the early 2000s. So what does all this mean, anyway, in the final analysis? I believe we're experiencing a shift from Homo sapiens to what I've been told by my guidance is Homo Galacticus, or Humanity 2.0, whichever you prefer. The next evolution of consciousness embodied in humans. How will this happen? I believe it occurs through what I call the soul reintegration process. We are picking up the pieces of ourselves that we left behind, like a trail of breadcrumbs through the dimensions, as we journeyed to this level of awareness so that we can find our way back home. What does all of this mean? You now have the opportunity to know how life really works, and it marks the beginning of your knowing who you are really, fully, and completely. You are not your body. You are not your mind or emotions. You are not your ego. You are spirit. You are light, solidified. You are soul, expressing through the physical body, which is created from the same essence. Your concept of who and what you are is evolving. You are becoming more of who you are, as you allow yourself to open to your greater aspect. Now, I've mentioned them before, but I'm going to throw them in here too. Here are some signs that this shift could be happening to you. You have the sense of energy surges. Perhaps your emotionality is up. Time might be more fluid. It can even affect your health, usually in the form of increased allergies or sensitivities to perfumes and that kind of stuff. Your body is going to adapt to each increase in vibration. You'll stabilize for a while, then the next wave hits. Each step along this path allows you to open to and embody more of your soul. So what is happening here? My perspective only. Our bodies and our brains are being rewired with each of these shifts. Yes, we can get lost in the mundane world, but we need to make time for spirit in our lives. We must go within, or we might have to do without. This world we are co-creating is not a world of logic with a linear perspective. It's a world of just knowing, of sensing, of feeling. We learn to be the experience and the experiencer at the same time. We need to start to feel our way into things and people and situations, and this is a skill we can all learn. We have collectively been on this path for at least centuries, probably hundreds of thousands of years, and I believe we are moving into what I would call the intuition/insight age. The focus is going to be on spirit. It's time to remember who you are at your center. You are soul, expressing into this dimension. To navigate this transition successfully, it's probably going to require us to surrender. Resistance will contract your energy field, and that causes the energy to back up. We are going to have to continuously choose to be conscious. Easy or hard, it's up to us. A good place to start with this, I always say, is shift your perception about this process. It's not something that's happening to you or coming to you from the outside. The actual transformation starts from the inside out. So I know this is a long episode, and it's pretty complicated, but I wanted to put it out there to plant the seed in your mind that this process that we are going through is a process that, frankly, has taken more years than this planet has been in existence. So place that in context in your mind and imagine that which created all that is breathing in that creation in preparation for another out-breath. And remember that one of those breaths takes over 4 billion years. If you found this episode useful, please share it with 2 other people so we can reach more listeners and bring more light to the planet. If you need some clarity, encouragement, or energy work, please go to www.juliamarie.us and click on the Book Now button on the home page. And now, a quote for you to ponder as you go about your day. Once the soul awakens, the search begins, and you can never go back. John O'Donohue, Anam Cara.